Hello, and we are live. Welcome back, everyone.
Right.
I have a very, very interesting panel discussion coming up for you next. So yeah, what I was saying, you've had a workshop, you kind of understand derivatives now, you have a basic understanding. And so now we have Abel Tedros with from Abel's Abstracts, Barney Mannerings from Vega, Danay from Kitengo, and Andrey Belyakov from Opium. And this will be a kind of panel discussion focused on DeFi, how it's eating the world of fintech, and how derivatives play a role in this ecosystem. They'll be covering topics such as where fintech has fallen short and why it can't innovate past distributing access to existing financial products and services, how DeFi will change finance from the ground up, the role of derivatives within DeFi, and also the fact that DeFi still has a long way to go. And so the access to DeFi in general and the risk management that we need that comes with that. So we're going to do 30 minutes of discussion. Abel will be leading. And then from there, I will jump in the last 10 minutes and we'll do Q&A from the audience. And we have a raise hand feature. So it'd be really cool to get some of the audience to come on stage themselves with the speakers and ask questions and just join the discussion if you have a really important point or something to input. So yeah, this will be the last session before lunch and it should be a good one. Without further ado, I'll hand over to Abel.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dagan, for the introduction and setting this up. I'm super excited to be here and be speaking with these amazing folks. I guess a natural place to start is introductions. So perhaps we'll go around, we'll do introductions, maybe a 1-2 minute kind of introduction on yourself, and then the problem you're solving with your company. The problem you're working on, and how you're solving that with your company. So, yeah, that should be a lot of fun. And I guess we'll go Andrey first, then we do Dan, and then we'll do Barney.
Hello, everyone. So the problem we're creating by our company, we're actually solving a problem. Yes. So, hello everyone, I'm founder of Opium, and the Opium is the protocol for decentralized derivatives. And in short, it's a very flexible protocol, so you can take any oracle and any derivative instrument, which is well known, or you can make your own definition, very simple, and combine those two. So you combine any oracle and any derivative, and then you have a very traditional view like a Bloomberg, you have tickers, you have derivatives. Super flexible and everything decentralized, fully composable with DeFi, but also traditional system, because we started to build it 2.5-3 years ago, and even before DeFi. So happy to bring my expertise on this, but also I was a professional trader for 10 years of derivatives. I traded all kind of fixed income rates derivatives, and I have my views, which I will share about what is the difference, why it's important, so on and so on.
Yes, and I'm very excited to hear those views. Thanks for coming along. Definitely have a wealth of experience in the traditional finance world and also in DeFi. And I guess working on DeFi before DeFi was even a term. So yeah, very interested to hear your views there. Cool. Dan.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Danay, CEO of Kitengo. Kitengo is a platform for retail investors to discover and invest in deep DeFi products. So things like liquidity pools, yield farming, all the fun stuff. The problem that we are solving is that we believe that DeFi is supposed to be inclusive. But really, if you look at the numbers, you can see that less than 500 wallets hold more than 90% of all DeFi tokens. The average borrow position on Compound is $18,000. It's clearly dominated by professionals, and we want to make it more inclusive. Happy to join the
Yes, and it's a pleasure to have you. Definitely a lot of whales in the world of crypto, and that could be put down to many different things. Obviously, complexity is a big one. So yeah, very excited to hear your views, and yeah, thanks for being on the panel, mate. Last but yeah, killer whales. Yeah, that is very, very true. Yeah. Last but definitely not least, the man running the show behind Vega, Barney. It's a pleasure to have you. Please feel free.
Awesome, thank you. The problem we're solving in Vega is the problem of derivatives in a completely decentralized environment. And one of the things that is that's important to understand about derivatives and about trading in general is that things like efficiency, things like the quality of the product, being able to replicate the payoff that you want are super, super important. And with spot trading, that's easy to do. You're exchanging something straight away, so you don't have a product with a life cycle, you don't have risk management. That's quite easy. But when you come to derivatives, the problem you have is that with on-chain systems with things like Ethereum, you have computational constraints, you have all kinds of issues with those systems that make it quite challenging to have really high-quality derivatives. And so the problem we set out to solve with Vega was how to have derivatives that, when it comes to real trading, so when it comes to crypto and DeFi breaking out from the crypto world and starting to influence the real world of retail, the real world of business, that you actually could have derivatives that would be able to be used in place of kind of legacy platforms. And that's really what we're solving at Vega. And I think we've made a very good start with the first version of Vega that's in testnet now, but there's an absolute ton of work to do to get it to that point where it can really challenge traditional finance.
Fantastic, and definitely a very interesting project. That's all kind of why we're here, to talk derivatives and that having an impact not only in the world of DeFi but also traditional finance as well. So yeah, again, thank you so much for being here, and super excited to be moderating this panel. So just a quick introduction on me, very, very brief, before we start today's panel. I'm a technical product manager, and I'm obsessed with the world of open finance, trying to create an open financial system that's fair, transparent, and global. And obviously DeFi is a real opportunity to do that. So very excited to kind of be in this world and be talking about different things and building different products. I have a podcast called Abel's Abstracts. It also has a newsletter as well, where we highlight different founders and product people trying to build this open financial system essentially bring us to the world that we all want to live in, right? So that's a bit about me. Very, very excited to be here and be moderating this panel. Dagan obviously did a great job of letting you guys know what we're going to be talking about, but I'll just do a quick refresher on some of the things we'll be talking about. Fintech and where it kind of falls short, and how it can't innovate past just simple distribution of different existing financial services and products and stuff like this, and how DeFi could potentially fill those gaps. And yeah, essentially how DeFi will be changing finance from the ground up, and the role of derivatives within that. And also, we've spoken a little bit here about whales in DeFi and the complexities. So we're also going to touch on some of the risks, but then also, some of the issues facing DeFi right now. So that's generally the structure of what we want to cover in today's topic, in today's panel. But we also want to keep it very loose. But I guess we'll start off with the first topic, fintech, and how it's kind of not able to innovate past the distribution of financial services, right? So I guess I'll talk on this piece very quickly, and then we'll open it up to the panel to talk about. But I mean, I've worked in fintech for a while. Many people know about what fintech is, so I don't think we need to kind of do a definition of that. But fintech has done a great job of increasing the access to financial products and services across the world, right? Like, there's a lot of different companies doing very interesting things in different parts of the world. But ultimately, fintech is about distributing financial products and services on existing infrastructure. And a lot of this innovation is still very much tied to existing systems, which means that, a lot of, for example, the UK has some of the best financial services in the world. And if you go to other places around the world, that's not the case. It's fintech and finance is very localized. And, that's a real issue in that there's no one giant, financial system, the same way that there is one giant internet, right? And so, very curious to hear everyone's thoughts. What are your opinions on what's going on with fintech, and how DeFi can plug into that? Maybe you start off with Andrey, then we go Barney, and then Dan.
Yep, sure. Thanks so much. And I like to be critical to many points, so I can challenge also something what you say. So I just like to challenge ideas. That's, I think, how we can make it better. So I don't completely agree that fintech is not able to bring the value and so on. I think fintech actually is doing a great job. The problem that we have in the traditional financial system, traditional banking sector, it is the biggest in the world. That's the biggest sector of the economy, but it's most conservative. So it looks like pretty much 100 years ago. And fintech was the first attempt to improve it, so to bring some innovation. And it's pretty cool. So I like some bank apps. I use them. I see this, but it was so conservative. The sector was so conservative. Then there is already a new technology. There is already 2 steps ahead, and we see already better solutions where there is no company. It's no central point of failure. There is mathematics behind financial instruments and services, and mathematics is always better than any company, any human behavior, and so on and so on. And that's why I'm so excited about DeFi. That's a good thing about DeFi, and definitely I'm very bullish on it. But I also being critical when you have this happening too fast and you don't have basically any rules. Anyone can do anything. It's cool, but at the same time, it's not so cool for all of us. So if we have no regulation, it's not extreme. Having like hundreds of regulators, that's one extreme, which I faced a lot when I was working in financial markets. But having no regulation is not extreme. And we should just be aware of what's going on. The whales is not the biggest problem in DeFi. Oh yeah, it's natural, you know. But amount of risks that we run in DeFi, amount of tail risks, amount of leverage we run, and amount the risks that users are exposed without knowing it. That's interesting. And I will stop here. Let's have a discussion maybe about it. But that's my point, and I think. That's very important, and something like 2007 is coming. And yeah, derivatives are important instruments. We can speak later, but some derivatives create even more risk in the system. Some derivatives can completely get rid of the risk, but some derivatives, they can make it worse. So I'm happy to challenge you guys or hear your view on this.
Yeah, I mean, so that's probably going to lead us into the conversation around risk and derivatives, which I'm very excited to have, because I think derivatives play a really interesting role when it comes to risk. So I guess before we jump into that, any comments from Barney or Dan on what Andrey's saying? And by the way, I love that this is kind of turning into debate. Those are the best kind of panels where you have different opinions and you kind of go back and forth. So yeah, Barney, Dan, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think, obviously, I think, it's worth being very aware of how early things are in DeFi. Like anyone who thinks that a thing that looks like DeFi looks now is what, if DeFi is successful and everyone, retail users are using DeFi, most of them will not use things that look like what DeFi looks like now. Like DeFi is experimenting and is early. And I think that's super important to understand. Like there are some people out there who really just want the Ethereum things they're using to just be in everyone's wallet pocket tomorrow, and that's kind of chaos, and it's not actually what will happen. It's like the early days of the internet. Everyone was using text-based protocols, and there were no rules, and you couldn't make payments, and nothing was encrypted. Like that's not where we ended up by the time the internet got in everyone's phone, and it's going to be the same. Like these are tools and things we're building. But what I would say, there's kind of a gap, and the problem that fintech has is that fintech is doing things within finance first, and it's therefore stuck within finance. And what I mean by stuck is if you want to go and do something where you need to interact with the bank before you do anything else, where you need connections to credit cards and everything else, if you want to do that, you have to play by those rules, and you have to pay the gatekeepers and not upset them too much, otherwise they close your account. I mean, you put the wrong words in your PayPal transaction and they'll shut down your account. So, the problem with fintech is that the solution space for innovation is relatively small. You can build some really cool innovations and make things more efficient. You're mostly doing it around the edges, and kind of in the same way that was true. TV, when TV got technology and people started rendering, using technology to make TV programs better and to move the data around the world, it was still broadcast. It was still TV. It was still run by TV channels. Then when we got the internet and we got communication peer-to-peer, it changes everything because you have an entirely different model. And the goal of DeFi and the goal of cryptocurrency in general and this space is to decentralize and to disrupt and to allow a complete change of the way that model works. And then you can re-architect and build things that are safe for everyone to use on top. And I think it's not really about giving everyone access to Sushi Swap. It's about giving everyone access to tools that are built on this new, much more efficient, much more open and fair set of infrastructure. And I think that's where we have to go. But to Andrey's point, if we do that without being aware of the risks and building the right tools for the risks and protecting consumers, then we'll probably end up in the same place we're kind of getting to with the internet, where there's all kinds of things going on that we didn't really want to happen. And it's bad enough when they're happening just with information. You see what the problems you can have with Facebook and with fake news and all this other stuff. Like when that happens with people's money and people's livelihoods and people's bank balance, that's like 10x worse. So we really have to try and avoid putting ourselves in that position again with this kind of technology.
Yeah, I want to build up on Andrey's point as well. I feel like the pace of innovation really sets apart like all fintech from DeFi. I'm a big fan of Andrew Law. He used to be my MIT professor of finance, and he discussed financial systems that are changing in the speed of thoughts. He discussed this like 10 years ago, and I think DeFi is a perfect real-world example of that. And I think even in the short amount of time that DeFi is out there, it invented those amazing concepts like automated market making, flash loans, even things like stablecoin. And I think that if DeFi continue to evolve in the pace that it evolves, it is going to hit fintech. And I'm absolutely fascinated by this idea of like natural evolution. It's almost like this social thing rather than just financial.
I very much agree with both of the sentiments there around fintech and DeFi, and you guys kind of alluded to it, all of it kind of in your answers about the pace of innovation, but then also risk as well, right? Derivatives plays an incredibly important role in mitigating risk. So maybe we could talk about DeFi and where derivatives sit within that. I know, Andrey, you have some interesting thoughts here, so maybe you could start off, and then we can dive.
Sure. And I first gonna disagree a little bit with Barney about that the fact that it's gonna go 10 times worse. I think it's gonna go a million times worse. So the same thing is gonna happen with your bank account. So you're not gonna be very happy to losing $50, but if you lose or half of your money, probably it's gonna be disaster. And I only pray that this financial crisis, which is coming, let's face it, in DeFi, it will be not big enough to destroy the belief of the people, the system. But I think the break-even point is already passed, so it's going to be fine. Talking about derivatives, it's what is derivatives? We discussed it another day. Derivatives, derivative is just a way to pack a risk and to trade a risk. So if you talk about options, it's one risk, futures, transferring of another risk. Why people invented derivatives? Just to exchange risks. So there's classical example, one party is buying, another is selling. They don't want to run into the price risk. They make a forward agreement, or they print futures and trade futures. And then it goes as complex as CDOs, CDS, and some instruments which nobody understands in the world, and maybe few people, and there's no collateral, and it's extremely dangerous. So that's all derivatives, and that's all the risks. And the market is pretty huge. So I always say like the approximate number is like 20 times bigger than the global economy. So the market of derivatives per year. And that's really exciting to try to innovate on this market and to cannibalize a little bit the bite from this market. At the same time, there's a lot of derivatives are not being created because it's very difficult at the moment. So if you want to create exotic derivative for something, we have an example on the Opium network. We have an example that companies in Spain, they just trading olive oil, and they don't have an instrument to hedge. They now building olive oil future on top of Opium. We were able to build it within a day, I think, or correct me, like 48 hours, but maybe probably less. And they can use it directly. If they go to investment bank, they will just feed the army of lawyers with this, and it's going to be very difficult and a lot of regulations, so on. So this is example of good usage of derivatives. Can be also creating a lot of risks and selling it to retail investor, which was also happening a lot. So that's all derivatives. I'm pretty excited, and within DeFi we definitely don't have enough, because normally credit market is 100 times, credit spot market 100 times smaller than derivative market, and credit market is something like 10. That's the normal ratios, and we're definitely not there in DeFi, and the maturity of DeFi will bring much more derivatives. And yeah, happy to speak about details, but let's continue the dialogue maybe.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right, and there is definitely a lack of derivatives, and that can be put down to, like you said, the maturity of this space and how it needs a lot more time to get to true maturity, right? Curious to hear other thoughts. Maybe Barney, since you're working at Vega, and then Dan, thoughts on derivatives, the role of.
Certainly, obviously agree with Andrey. At Vega, we're doing a very similar thing. I guess we're creating derivatives, and with a sort of aim of creating capital efficient and high quality derivatives that can be really used to increase to improve markets. And as Andrey says, the point of derivatives is you move risks around. You kind of unbundle risks from the physical things they're attached to, and you move them around. And if you don't want a certain risk, you can trade out of it. And if you want to take on a risk and you have a position on the future, you can trade into the risk, and derivatives allow that. And for the users of derivatives, particularly who are hedging, it's very important for them to have things like capital efficiency. It's also important for them to have derivatives products that work properly. So if you have kind of some of the attempts that have been made, particularly in Ethereum, to create derivatives, have created kind of poor Xerox copies of the real derivative, where actually you've got an option where you have a 10% stop loss either side, or it's fully collateralized or something, and you end up with this position where you can't actually replicate the same transfer of risk that you would with a real option somewhere else. And so if you can't do that, then you're actually not able to use it for those purposes. So I think it's really important. And markets are improved by the existence of derivatives. They tend to improve liquidity, they improve price determination. Some of the volatility and crazy pumps and dumps that you see actually happen because people who know that it's crazy and would like to take a position against it, which would help to mediate that, are unable to. And so part of the evolution of cryptocurrency and DeFi is to enable to have derivatives. But what I would say is there are actually a whole class of derivatives in DeFi which people don't realize are there, and they're probably the riskiest thing of all. And what I mean is, most of the DeFi protocols you see, like all these crazy yield farming protocols, even things like Maker, they're all actually kind of derivatives, and most of them are kind of really complicated derivatives, except no one has actually taken the time to look at them and go, well, this is actually a derivative which is kind of like the payoff of this, plus this, plus this, plus with these risks, and it's dependent on the price of this and the performance of this Oracle feed. And if that was finance, if you were in an investment bank or a fund, someone would be sat there with a Monte Carlo model, and they would be modeling it under all kinds of assumptions. What happens if the Oracle fails? What happens if the price of Ethereum drops by 50%? They would be doing all of that, and they'd be going, okay, here's all of my risks that I'm taking on by taking out this position. And what we're not doing is actually acknowledging all of the existence of these risks and derivatives in the system we have, and actually understanding what that means and how they react. And that is probably the most dangerous part, is that we're kind of pretending things that are complex and are taking on a lot of risk are actually much simpler than they are. And that's one of the things that we're trying to actually, bring out in the open as Vega, is to say, this is a derivative. When you have a market, this is the market, this is the derivative. And one of the things we plan to do over the next couple of years as well is to roll out tools that let you say, here is your risk, here is how to think about the risk, here is what you're exposed to with this product, and actually make it so that people can learn. Because I think people don't get enough credit for their ability to learn and their ability to respond. When they see stuff fail, they won't do the same thing again. They'll see that went wrong, and they will try not to do it again. It's like if you see people skiing, falling over, you don't go down that run, or it's icy and you take more care. But if you don't show them that, and if no one understands, it's much more like gambling, where in fact the role of gambling is the casino hides from you the true risk you're taking and makes you excited to take it and not really understand, and makes you feel like you might win even though you won't. And that's kind of the difference between trading and gambling. And I think if we're going to succeed in letting everyone have access to these quite complex and dangerous products, we have to do it by succeeding in letting them be educated about the risks that they're taking.
So what do you think at the moment, the DeFi, is it a gambling or is it a trading? That's
It's gambling.
I have a number of different opinions. It probably depends on the things, but one of the things I think there's a lot of in DeFi is we're talking about the fact that a lot of the positions are held by whales, and I think one of the things that you kind of get in DeFi is you get people who are big and who are influential, who can go in on a new thing and make it seem popular and grow. They can get in early with their big size, and they can know they're going to sell to the next guy. And there's a quite unsustainable kind of, there's a lot of things all getting smashed together. It's like, is this a fair launch? Well, you say it's a fair launch because it was all to community, but if it's all to the section of the community that knew it was going to happen and got in early and is going to get the big payout and leave someone else holding the bag when it turns out to be worthless, that's very different. That's not actually as fair as you might think. And so, what do I think is DeFi? I don't know. There's a kind of a bunch of things. There's some things that are really interesting and good. I look at Compound and I think they're aiming to create some things that will be really useful, and in their long-term goals are sort of aiming to create an alternative way of sort of lending and making money, which can be used by banks. And Block has a really good way of looking at that. And you look at some of the other things that are going on, and they're trying to create markets and they're trying to create products that are difficult to create on Ethereum, and they're taking shortcuts, and we'll see how that turns out. And then you get others which are simply kind of quite cynical, like money grabs by the people creating them, I think. And so I think I think there's a lot going on. There's a lot being learned, and I wouldn't want to dismiss anything out of hand, but I do think it's important for us to sort of understand that they're not all created equal in this sort of DeFi world.
That's very true, and kind of going back to your earlier point of like if you're not fully understanding of all the potential risks, then it kind of falls into the category of more gambling than it is investing or trading, right? So if you're like, I guess curious to kind of dive a bit deeper. So like if you are a whale or in the in crowd with some of these early fair launches, and with the hopes to kind of dump on retail later, would you still consider that to be gambling? Because I guess in that case, you're still quite unaware of all the potential.
That's a good question. Some of the people who are doing that, I think there are people who know exactly what they're doing, and they know they're going to make money, and they're like they know exactly what they're doing, and it's fine. There are also people who think they know what they're doing, who are going in and they've made money so far, and I think when Andrey talked about the 2007 event, you're going to find, and this happened it happened in 2017, so you don't even need to go all the way back to 2007. You just look at the ICOs, and you can find there are a bunch of people who think they know what they're doing. They think they're informed, same as what you see on Robinhood with the people buying into bankrupt Hertz go bankrupt, and then people on Robinhood buy it even though they're bankrupt. Like, you get this thing, people think they're informed, they've read the right website, whatever, they're in a Telegram group, they're pretty certain they're making good trades. But at the moment that there's a rising tide lifts all boats, and when that stops happening, someone pulls the rug out from underneath, you then find out that actually that you weren't as informed as you thought. And I think there's a large, there are some people who really do know what they're doing and are just making money out of the whole thing. And then there are probably a large number of other people who are, who are exposed and don't necessarily realize it.
Very, very true. I guess we'll go, Dan, if you have any comments on that. And then what we'll do is we'll open up to the audience so we can do Q&A, because I think there's an interesting conversation.
Just a small caveat on Barney's points. I can't agree more on most of it, especially the beginning, when I think there's a lot of artificial complexity that is added to the system for different reasons. But people don't call like the financial instruments that they're using in their old names. They're inventing this new jargon that I find very confusing. So people are ending up taking things like long and short positions without realizing that's what they're doing. And like one example that I find really interesting is that when people invest in liquidity pools, they're actually betting against price volatility. Like that's something that took me a while to realize myself. And I find this really interesting that it's not written clearly anywhere. At least I haven't encountered it. But that's one thing aside that I completely agree with Barney. The other thing which I want to counter is that I don't want to make this claim that this is super complicated and only professionals should be doing this. I think that there's a certain amount of education and discovery that retail consumers can do. And I wouldn't want to tell people who can't commit like fully to this to be professionals and like spend all their time doing this, running models, that it's like absolutely not for them if they can't commit fully. I think that there's a risk in like not being inclusive. I feel like the industry should be responsible enough to present things in a truthful way and to present the risk in a truthful way and allow people to invest in DeFi without like having this casino-like experience. So people can and should, in my belief, invest a small amount of their portfolio into DeFi instruments or into blockchain. That's, again, I'm not a financial advisor, but the people that I love in my life, I tell them take like 3% of your assets, 5% of your assets, invest them in things like Bitcoin, and yes, you can lend them out. That's, again, that's my risk profile. That's what I believe in, and I don't want people in the audience to feel like if they can't go fully professional, it's not for them. Like, I don't agree.
That was definitely not what I was trying to say there. I think what I was actually trying to say was probably two things. The first one is that many of the DeFi products that sound simple are much more complicated than they're made out, and often artificially so. Like, they don't need to be, and they're actually, that complexity makes it look like, or that makes it look like they're actually very intelligent products that are going to make people yield forever, when actually they're products that are just exposed to a certain type of risk that's not exposed to, not made clear. And so I think the first point is kind of, we've got to try and design things in DeFi that are useful for some type of investor, rather than things that just are going to blow up as soon as something goes wrong, or are just not actually useful. So that's the first thing. I think we've got to try and keep on the side of designing things that have a use, even if they also have a risk. And then I think the other side of it is making sure that we are transparent about the risks, and making sure, like, as I said in Vega, the thing that's most important to me is that if we take these things to anyone on Earth, that we also take them some ways to find out about the risk they're taking, some ways to visualize that risk. Like, you should be able to see, a good example is leverage, right? If a simple visualization that an exchange could show you when you take leverage is how long on average would your position last, not taking any particular opinion about the market, but how long on average would your position last if you took this much leverage before it would get wrecked, just based on the volatility of that market, right? Because if you take 100x leverage on Bitcoin, and you have an opinion about where Bitcoin will be in 2 months' time, the probability is not that you get to find out whether you're right or wrong. The probability is you lose all your money long before, because your leverage kills you. And like, there's a simple visualization to show you that. Like, what's the time horizon of your trade? What's the time horizon of your volatility? But until we start to build platforms that are responsible to users and say, hey, this is the risk, this is how to think about it in a way that's understandable, then we don't make something that the general people can actually approach and use in a good way.
I actually want to comment. That's you're bringing a really good point, guys. About building something which looks sexy, but nobody understands. That was in 2007. We had this movie when I used to work on the trading floor. Like, the guy was saying to another guy, "Let's make a high yield fund." I say, what does it actually mean? It doesn't matter. So people like yield, people like high yield even more. So let's just put there all the crap and sell it to retail, and we'll make money. And that's leads to the financial crisis. That's pretty much what you're saying. On the interesting point on the betting on the against the volatility on the Uniswap or automatic market makers, I don't fully. I think it's actually betting on the mean reverting. So the volatility is not so dangerous, but it should be mean reverting. And actually, if you look at the Uniswap of by 1 inch, they made this Uniswap, which we discussed. It's a long volatility. You take a long volatility position if you use it. So on a high volatility, it outperforms the Uniswap. So it performs better. And of course, that's pretty cool to see. But this is not the end, right? You can make a pool which performs better on a bear market, on a bull market. You can make informed. Finally, somebody needs to make an informed market maker that takes actually information into account. So if the price goes up or down too much, then as arbitrageurs, they will make more money than investors of the pool, because investors of the pool will pay to arbitrageurs, and that's okay. That's good first step to introduce, but that's nothing even comparable to professional markets. So the market maker always take information into account, and if Ethereum goes down too much, it immediately reprice and keep this money in the pool, not giving it away to arbitrageurs, and so on, so on. And doing this on chain, how scalable it is, how smart it is to do all these calculations on chain with one single market maker. So it should be like 100 to 1,000 market makers, and they should operate somewhere on the layer 2. That's how we build Open, by the way. So we only believe in settlements. That's it for the blockchain. But all these market makers, they should act somewhere else. And yeah, that tells you about the maturity of DeFi, and we now see it's going. So Serum basically said about it. Kyber Network yesterday dropped very nice report. They have this same idea. They have idea of order books instead of just pools, and so on, so on. And that's a good traction. And the final point, talking about risk disclosure and educating people. For the last 2,000 years, the problem was not solved. So it's not a recent problem, you know. For the last 2,000 years, people are driven by two things mostly, by fear and by greed. And sometimes there is more fear, sometimes more greed. But I think it's a bit romantic to think that, okay, we're going to educate people and they're going to be educated. So it doesn't work like this. Because even what Barney said, if you show some implied metrics, like, okay, you would run this long with this leverage, immediately going to be financial engineer who going to overcome it and make a product which actually has a quite good measure, but put you extra risk for extra money, and so on and so on. So that's actually interesting topic, how to educate people and how to disclose the risks. I don't have an answer. So 2,000 year problem going to still exist, but I think at least we should all speak the same language. We should all say, explain the risk or disclose the risk in the same terms. So whatever it means, that it's comparable at least. If we not measuring the risk or measuring everybody measuring in own terms, not going to help.
I completely agree, and I'm curious to kind of dive deeper into that point around if you're able to label the risk, and a financial engineer can come in and create something gives you more risk, more return, but for more risk. But I realize Dagon's also here as well, and Dagon's going to help me out with Q&A. So maybe we can quickly discuss that, then we switch over to Q&A, and then we can get some audience participation going. So just if you could elaborate on that, and then we'll switch to Q&A.
I don't know. I think we can get the audience involved now. Sure.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yes.
Yeah, I realize the time's actually going pretty quickly. Cool. So I can see a couple of questions. So I guess Dagon, we can get people on stage to ask.
Yeah, we can actually get people up here on stage as one of the speakers, and they can ask questions to any of the panelists. So if anyone wants to raise their hand, you can come and join us on stage. And if you're too shy, then you can ask the questions in the chat instead. But if someone wants to raise their hand now, I can let them in.
Raise your hand, guys. Let's do this. I can see Dan.
We are. Dad, go. Okay, let's go with Ashley then. Okay, Ashley from Vega has asked a question. He says, in UK retail finance, there's now a self-certified sophisticated investor test that websites have been forced into making all their users take. These tests include questions like, does the FSCS guarantee your deposits on this platform? Do you think we need the same kind of test for users of DeFi? So you guys can answer that. I've also noticed someone's raised their hand, so we'll get them next.
I don't know. I tend to think those sorts of tests are not the right way. It's kind of funny, if you've got enough money, you can be as dumb as you want and trade anything. And if you're relatively poor, then you have to pass tests and fill out forms and tell everyone what you're doing and get permission. And I think that's, I don't think that's the right way to do this stuff. I think, I think part of it is actually letting people see what happens when things go wrong. Part of it is giving them the information to be doing things with their eyes open. I mean, ultimately, gambling is legal, and you can go and lose all your money betting on horses. So if you can get to a point where people know when they go in that they might lose all their money if they don't feel like, if they haven't taken the time to understand something and if they don't know what they're doing, then it's no worse than gambling, right? So, ultimately, I think you just need to give people the information. You need to give people the tools, and you need to give people the ability to educate themselves if they want. And then you need to kind of let them do stuff. Like, ultimately, you can't stop people taking risk. And so when we try to, we tend to just create these perverse incentives.
Absolutely. So my ex-colleague, he was an old trader, an old gentleman, and he said he started to invest in equity when he was a kid, and now for his kids it's impossible to open an account, normally account, because they're not 18, so on and so on. And the bank said, no, it's risky. And he said, how risky it is if they earn $100 over the summer and want to buy some equity just to learn how it works. What is risky? Is it risky to educate people? So by taking the real risk? So I completely agree.
Okay, I'll open to the next question. We have someone who's raised their hand, so they're going to join us. This is from Morgan. Hello, Morgan.
Hey, what's going on? Yeah, I was wondering, what happens when the tightest markets in crypto are on DeFi? So say you had the best market in the world for wrapped Bitcoin to USDT that was sitting on 0x or Kyber or wherever it was, and you've got that economic incentive to hop onto DeFi. What occurs? Like massive regulation or massive adoption, or like what happens if you can do that?
Probably a combination of those two things, to be honest. I think, I think the larger DeFi gets as a share of everything, the more it's going to be attempted to be regulated. But regulating decentralized systems is going to have to be very different to regulating centralized systems, just in order to be effective, because you don't have this you don't have the player in the middle who you can just sort of ask them to do KYC and AML and everyone. So it's got to happen a different way. But then, once that happens, once liquidity is there, once people are trading on those platforms, the advantages will be clear, it will be global, and I don't see how it gets stopped. So I think massive adoption comes.
I think regulation is a little bit easier for the government than you imply. So everybody use, on 90% of people, they use MacBooks, iPhones. So if just on iPhone I don't have a wallet in an app store, so 90% of the people, they would never go install Linux and run a node or do something like this. It's pretty easy to regulate within 80% or 90% of people.
Yeah, I mean, I agree in that you can stifle this stuff if you really wanted to, but ultimately these are networks, and yes, you're right. Not everyone is gonna spin up nodes and go the full 9 yards, but you can, and maybe if there was a way to make that process less complicated, then there's still a level of resiliency there, right? But yeah, I totally agree. You can definitely stifle this stuff, and we should be. And I think what Barney said is right? Where there should be a more educated or a more refined approach with these new systems, right? Like you can't just map the old way of regulating these instruments and these networks like you do in traditional finance. You need just a new structure from the ground up. And there's a popular idea that's circulating that the role of regulators will become more like auditors. Not saying that's going to happen, but that's an interesting idea to explore, where there's going to be kind of there to audit these systems and to kind of help make sure that they work as function as they say they do, right? But yeah.
Cool, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for the question.
Morgan. We have one last question, unless anyone wants to post another one. How will we bring in liquidity from traditional finance, e.g. typical market makers? And this is from Dennis from Opium Protocol.
I know the answer. But I'm wondering what other guys think. So we have basically.
Go ahead.
No, we just think it's quite important, and we had an approach how to do it. We just clone the liquidity because we can list the same instruments like centralized exchanges. We can also market make and hedge yourself on centralized, and then it's not we, like everybody. We will, maybe Dennis is spoiling a little bit already, but we will open it to everyone. Everyone can run a Hummingbot and just transfer liquidity to DeFi and earn his interest without taking classic risks of DeFi. That's our approach, but we've discussed this a lot, and there are many ways, and we think that it should be done. It's a cool thing to do. So take all the centralized liquidity and bring it there, decentralized. Maybe, what do you think, guys?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's very, very important, and I think the sort of the strategy you talk about works for some things, and i.e. the things that are already on the centralized exchanges, and certainly with Vega, it's kind of similar. You know, if Vega has US dollar Bitcoin markets, then obviously the first thing that you do is get people running Hummingbot and arbitrage bots and arbing it against BitMEX and wherever else, and that gives you liquidity in the first markets. But you know, the part of the point of DeFi is to not sort of cut the umbilical cord actually away from the centralized exchanges and let people create new things that didn't exist elsewhere and avoid that dependency. You know, and I think it's actually the same way that liquidity gets attracted in centralized markets, and it's if you have a good return that you can make by providing liquidity, you know, and Vega's built, you know, with additional incentives. So effectively, the fee revenue and the revenue that an exchange would otherwise make goes to liquidity providers in order to give them an incentive to do this. But if you have good and efficient pricing, if you have reasonably capital efficient derivatives, so if you have good leverage and low margin requirements, and if you have good returns and people are coming in and there's lots of volume and trading, then there's no reason why you sort of jump market making on Serum, right? So, you know, there's no reason why these large traditional market makers won't come in. The big thing that's stopping them coming in now is, although we think there's, look how many billions is locked in DeFi, it's basically tiny. Like compared to the markets that will get big traditional market makers excited en masse, DeFi is still tiny. And if we make DeFi big, and if we make the pricing efficient, we make the derivatives work well, and get the capital efficiency, the money will come because, you know, market making is a profitable activity. Exactly.
So it should be just the first step. So absolutely, and DeFi is a million times bigger than the derivative market still.
So building on that, even if you only look at the current crypto market, if you look at the current crypto market cap, you see that only about 5% of crypto is generating interest. Like 95% of crypto still sits in wallets that don't generate any interest, 95%. So I believe we just have to keep on innovating and creating value for users. And if we can sustain certain amount of interest on DeFi products, the funds are just going to be attracted there. Like it just makes no sense of 95% of all crypto being ideal, not generating any interest. And specifically what we're trying to improve there is the discovery and education part for retail, but just the pace of innovation, I think, is the key.
All right. Well, I think that's a great way to wrap up this panel. I guess just final thoughts, quick fire. Anyone want to say some final things before we wrap up? That'd be great. So if anyone has anything, just shout, and then we can.
Yeah, sure. My last point is the same, basically, like my first point. Think about the risk, because it's a key, and it's going to be a key. I agree. It's cool when the token or project generate interest, but this interest coming from somewhere, so it's paid from somewhere. If it's a zero-sum game, that it's paid by someone, it's somebody's loss. And I hope that this is going to be clear for the users, and they're not going to run into big problems. And I hope the DeFi will reach the real economy, and the real economy is growing, and that's where the interest is coming from.
Yeah, I agree with that totally. And my final thought, I guess, would be, you know, what we're looking at the moment is we're looking at a lot of stuff that's happening on Ethereum, which means you have super high gas prices, you have super low computational capability, you have quite basic products. Even, you know, most of the trading's AMMs. By the time we get serious amounts of traditional liquidity and real finance moving across to decentralized stuff, the pricing of major markets won't be AMM curves. There's no way, right? You know, if you think about the price of a company that just has just announced it's gone bankrupt, it doesn't smoothly move down a curve to zero. It goes to zero immediately. And as soon as you get to needing to have large amounts of liquidity and large amounts of trading happening, that's not going to scale. It's good for low liquidity launches of stuff, but it's not going to scale. And that's going to be true of a lot of these things. So I think we're kind of seeing a first wave of Ethereum DeFi. And I think there's an entire round of kind of, you know, second wave DeFi, if you like, if you want to call it something like that, you know, which is going to come along and increase the efficiency and increase the sophistication of what's available. And I think, you know, we're starting to see some of that stuff get built on things like Polkadot, things like Vega as well, things being proposed for Ethereum 2, Cosmos. People are building all these things, and you're going to start to see a kind of a wave of the next generation of stuff coming, and that's going to be really exciting to see how that addresses some of these problems we've been talking about.
My final thoughts are that DeFi is, in fact, risky and complex, but I encourage everybody who can and want to learn about it to try it out. Like, don't be afraid. Don't make crazy bets. Don't do anything you can afford, but try it out. Don't be afraid. And if you want to learn more about what's out there, you want to help in discovery and education, like, look me up personally. I'm gonna make it my mission to try and help you out. Yeah, be careful, but don't be afraid. It's not that complex.
Well, that is a wonderful note to end the panel on. It's been my absolute pleasure to be here with you guys. Thank you all for spending your, I guess, Friday coming here to chat more about DeFi, derivatives. I think this was a really fun conversation. I definitely learned a lot. I hope it's the same for everyone in the audience. A big shout out to you guys, the audience, and also Dagan for helping out with the Q&A. Thanks, everyone, and we will see you very soon.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much. This was a really good session, and I'm really glad the conversations that we were able to unearth. We're now into our lunchtime break, so it will be 30 minutes, and we'll be continuing again at 5 p.m. And that will be with an AMA with myself and Juliana, who's an ex-Wall Street trader. Any questions you may have during the break, or anything you want to surface about just derivatives in general, or questions for a trader, please come and find me in the social lounge. I'll be hanging out there in about 10-15 minutes. And you can also chat to each other in the social lounge at one of the tables. There's 8 people per table. Just have a chat, meet people, and yeah, start networking. I'll see you guys in 30 minutes. Have a lovely lunch. Bye-bye.